We continue with our special edition of Brief.IL episodes as Operation Roaring Lion, or the Operation Epic Fury as it is called in the United States, is still ongoing. Yesterday, Iran declared the appointment of Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's supreme leader, taking over after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, his father, was eliminated. To make the event unforgettable for Israelis, Iran launched a nightly attack on many cities in Israel, targeting them with missiles, sending millions of people to shelter. I am Ofir Dayan, a researcher at the INSS focusing on anti-Semitism and delegitimization, and in this special episode, I am joined by Danny Citrinowitz, a senior researcher at the INSS Iran and Shiite Axis research program. In accordance with the IDF Homefront Command, we are recording this episode remotely. This is Brief.IL. Let's begin. So, Danny, let's start with the beginning. Where are we in this operation/war/escalation? What did we achieve so far by the Israeli and American attacks in Iran?
So we're almost 10 days into the war, and I can say that definitely we have an amazing operational achievement. First and foremost, decapitating the senior leadership of Iran again, and on top of them, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and having the ability to fly back and forth over the Iranian sky by significantly damaging the air defense of Iran, allowing Israel and the US to actually attack the strategic abilities of Iran from the Navy, air, and of course missile array. That's actually helping limiting the ability of the Iranians to launch missiles towards the state of Israel. But of course, we have to say that strategically, definitely in everything related to the undermining the regime is shaken. There are some cracks, but it doesn't seem that he's on the way to be toppled. So if the goal is to topple this regime, and I'm not sure we are close to the target, but if the goal is to significantly damage the Iranian strategic abilities, definitely in the last 10 days, Israel and the US have an amazing achievement in that regard.
So let's say tomorrow morning we all wake up and President Trump decides to stop the war and he's getting tired of it. What are the Iranian capabilities in terms of ballistic missiles and the nuclear program, which are the two main kinetic threats for Israel and the United States?
Well, you're touching a very important point. I think that we have to remember where we were 8 months ago in the Rising Line operation. And we finished the operation. We had amazing achievements. We significantly damaged the Iranians' ability to launch missiles and using Midnight Hammer, significantly preventing or making sure that the Iranians do not have the ability to have some sort of industrialized enrichment in Iran. But 8 months after, we know that the Iranians rebuild their capabilities. So we must assume, definitely we'll speak about the election of Mojtaba as the supreme leader, but we must assume that this leadership, while or in the point where this war will end, which will rebuild its capacity. First and foremost on the missiles. Goes without saying, we know they will do that. It's obvious. But even more than that, I think, given the results of this war, they will think about changing the strategy regarding the nuclear. So before we are ending the war, and I think we have to differentiate between the missile, that it's a threat, but not an existential threat like the nuclear. Before ending the war, we have to make sure that we will take care, especially everything related to the enrichment capabilities and material that is left in Iran, especially the 440 kilos for 60%. Because if this war will end tomorrow, and we didn't take care of that, then the ability of Iran to rush into a bomb, if the new supreme leader will decide about it, will be quicker and easier. So I think, yes, we have major achievements, but if the war will end today without taking care of that, I think we have major problem in front of us.
So you touched on the 440 kilograms of enriched uranium. I think it was 60% that is still in Iran, somewhere buried under the ruins in the rubble of the June Israeli and American attack on the Iranian nuclear sites. Say that we want and need to address those 440 kilograms of enriched uranium. How can we go about it? President Trump and in some reports, Prime Minister Netanyahu as well discussed a ground operation, a combat elite operations inside Iran to extract that material. What are possible options, kinetic and non-kinetic, to address this problem?
Well, definitely there are two main options. One is the kinetic one, but we have to remember that the material is buried inside the Isfahan tunnel. So in order to extract the material,
Do we know where it is, as far as you
I think there
understand?
is understanding where it is. I think more or less. But the problem is, first, yes, we need to locate it, but I think that more or less we know that. The problem is that if you want to get to those tunnels, then it's not like a command operation of 1 or 2 hours. You actually have to more or less to conquer that field, the Isfahan nuclear site.
To
Yeah, to
isolate
isolate it, exactly, and then extract the material. But you have to remember that the Iranian offered before the war to dilute this material. And it is crucial because without having the 60%, they'll be far from the ability to reach some sort of fissile material for 90%. So this is crucial element. So if you can extract that without an agreement, okay. But if you cannot, then you have to think hard and clear about reaching an agreement with the Iranians that eventually will take this material out, dilute it regardless. But we have to think about this option also, because like I said earlier, if the war will end without finding a solution for this material, then we have a major problem in front of us.
So publicly, Iranian officials insist that it is their right to enrich uranium, like it's the right of France or Britain or other countries that, according to foreign press, have enriched uranium before. But do you think that after such an operation, an American-Israeli operation in Iran, Iran would actually be willing to discuss handing over this 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, or would it insist on maintaining it inside Iran?
Definitely, it's not going to be easy, given the fact that twice Iran negotiated an agreement and twice Israel and the US attacked during negotiation. So for them, I think it will be very hard to negotiate. I think the only solution is to run it through the regional countries, Saudi Arabia, Oman. And again, even then, it's going to be tough. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we have to ask ourselves what is the solution for this development, especially the nuclear capabilities. Do we continue the war until what? Until they eventually will surrender and give this material away? It's not going to happen. While this regime stays in Iran, they will preserve the material unless something dramatic will happen, for example, an agreement. So I agree with you completely. It will be very hard to discuss with them. I think that also they will reconsider even staying at the NPT, the Treaty on Non-Proliferation, because again and again, negotiation leads to war in their mind as well, at least.
And that means also Saba visiting those
Yeah,
sites.
IAA definitely. This is the issue of that, meaning that there's also a question about the IAA, like you mentioned. The question is, do they visit the sites after U.S. and Israel conquering the sites, or they need the approval of Iran? So we have major question, but it relates to the fact that even if we'll have a solution to that, you have to remember one important thing about the Iranian nuclear program. The Iranian enriching uranium for the last 25 years. They have vast number of scientists working on this issue. So you cannot delete the knowledge. And so you have to assume that eventually, if they will try to do something, then they will have the ability theoretically to do developing some sort of a device or a bomb. Why it's so important? Because if you want to block the path to bomb, you have to block the ability to reach fissile material. So I know for now it's very hard to talk about the negotiation as we discussed. It's going to be very hard, but it's a must, because at the end of the day, while looking at the damage that now the Iranians are absorbing, there is no doubt in my mind that they're in a way like the end of the Iran-Iraqi war. They will look for something, the ultimate card that will deter Israel and Iran from attacking in the future. So the war need to end with us blocking this ability.
So you touched a bit on the regime, and we're recording this episode on March 9th. in the afternoon Israel time, which means that a few hours ago, the Iranian leadership declared Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as the new supreme leader of Iran. We know that he was not necessarily the designated one to begin with. Do you think that he will be widely accepted by the Iranian leadership, by the Iranian people, even those who support the regime? And do you see friction perhaps happening inside the regime with maybe a possible power grab by the sides of others who are not elected, like Mojtaba Khamenei?
Well, definitely, I can say that if we knew from the beginning that he would be elected, we would have think twice about killing his father. The problem with Mujtaba is relatively young, 56, ideologically rigid, but I think even more importantly, I think he wants vengeance. You know, his father was killed, his mother was killed, his wife was killed, his kid, a lot of members of his family by Israel in the U.S. attack. This is one element. Adding to the fact that we know in the past that he was to the extreme in terms of everything related to how he see Iran need to be handled. And I think that yes, he didn't have any public position. He wasn't president. He wasn't anything else. But he ran Khamenei's his father office. So, and we know from multiple people declaration that we know that he is to the extreme in terms of its view, and that's before his family was decapitated by Israel. So we have to assume that he will be very hard to work with in terms of the West interacting with Iran. This is one element. The second thing that we have to remember is the fact that I don't think he would have been elected unless his father was decapitated by Israel. I think that he wasn't the best runner-up in terms of the fact that Iran didn't want to be a monarchy. But I think once his father was decapitated, they had to continue the legacy, the continuation of Khamenei's legacy. So they had to approve him. The thing is that again, we don't know if it's gonna live or not. I'm sure that he's top of the target list right now. So I don't know whether they're gonna survive or not. But if he's going to survive, and this regime is going to survive, I think that what we'll see under him is Iran that more or less some sort of military dictatorship run by Mujtaba Khamenei because he's highly connected to the RGC, and the RGC highly support him, so we have a major advantage of that. And I'm sure that behind the scene that they try to push for his appointment. This is one aspect. And I think that will become, I won't say North Korea model of Iran, but I think we'll see more North Korea behavior of Iran, meaning that they'll be more close to Russia and China. They will be much more close in terms of the West. And I think they'll be very fierce and everything happening domestically in Iran, but also the outside of Iran. And we already discussed the opportunity of him deciding to rush the nuclear bomb. So the bottom line of everything, I think that this is a very bad news for the Iranian people and also for Israel and the US. And I think it's also very bad news for those who thought that the war will end quite soon. I think his appointment and the fact that the US and President Trump thought that he can influence this appointment, I think will push Israel and especially the US to continue the war rather than trying to interact with the new Iranian leadership.
So while the Iranians declare a new supreme leader in Israel and the United States and other places across the world, there has been discussions of regime collapse or maybe even actively toppling the regime. We both understand, and I think many of our listeners who follow recent events understand that a toppling of the regime will come from the Iranian people, not from an external pressure campaign. However, you said on a recent interview that we can contribute to the destabilization of the regime, to weaken the regime. Which targets do we need to look at when we come and want to weaken this regime? And should we weaken them kinetically or in other means?
So that's a very important question, and I want to highlight one couple of things about that. First, when you want to strike or to undermine the Iranian regime, you have to do what Israel and the US is already doing. They're attacking RGC and Basid headquarters all over Iran. So actually, you're undermining the base, the platform that is actually the regime sits on in terms of everything related to the pillars, everything related to the RGC and the Basij. And of course, they're attacking more or less a little bit by the senior leadership of these organizations, trying eventually to see how they can weaken them significantly so they're allowing the ability to people to go out to the street. So definitely we see that happening. I think also it's the issue of illustrating to the Iranian people that the regime is weak. hence the attack, and I think it was a problematic attack on the fuel depot near the Iranian, near Tehran airport. So definitely we're trying to do so. The problem is that nobody can foresee what will happen. We actually can end this war and the regime will stay. And 1 month later, the regime will be toppled, or the regime will say, nobody knows, it's a crystal ball. The problem is if we are defining that as a target of the war itself. It's because if you're putting that as a target, regardless the achievement that we have, the operational one, strategically, if I'm not fulfilling this target, then the war is not a success. So I think it's important for us to be realistic about what we can achieve in this war itself, knowing that eventually there is a good possibility, given the fact that this regime is cohesion and is managed to overcome the decapitation of Khamenei, that eventually we'll have to make some adjustment in our purpose of the war, thinking more about tangible things like missiles and nuclear, and less like vague purposes, like, for example, creating the opportunity for people to condition of people to go to the streets. This is why I think that this is a major problem. And I'm not saying don't continue attacking the Al-Jasi and Basij, but I'm saying make adjustment to your expectations, knowing that we can find ourselves after this war with the same regime.
So, in the last few days, President Trump made statements that sounded a lot like he's not fully going to collapse the regime, but he is willing to accept a leader from inside the regime that he is okay with, that would cooperate with the West. It's kind of a la Venezuela. So, decapitating the head and then bringing someone else from inside the regime that you're okay with. Do you even see a possibility of that happening in Iran? Is there anyone in the current Iranian regime that is open to speaking with the West and maybe meeting the bare
Yeah.
minimum that Trump is willing to
Of
accept?
course, the answer is no. But I think even more than that, I think there is major problems when we're talking about. I think how the President Trump see Iran. I think there is misconception and misunderstanding about Iran itself. Just the way you can think that you can find a Delcy Rodriguez in Iran, it actually shows that he doesn't understand the gap that we have between Venezuela and Iran. And this is not a theoretical gap, because if that is his expectation, then he will continue the war until he will meet his expectation. So the war can be month, I don't say years, but month in length, because he will try to reach that. And that is a problem. We have to adjust our expectations. No Iranian leader will work with President Trump. No Iranian leader will be supported by the US. You won't find a Delcy Rodriguez that will change the Iranian ideology 180 degrees. On the contrary, every time he's declaring that, they will try to make sure that he will know that he cannot have no success of imposing anything on the new Iranian leadership. This is why this is not a theoretical discussion. Even more than that, this is a problem because we are in the midst of war. That Israel and the U.S. have amazing operational achievement, as we said. But strategically, I don't think there was a planning together to discuss the end game, to discuss the what are the real purposes of the war. I think that everything is very vague, and the problem is that the connection between vague purposes, and from one hand, and from the other hand, everything related to the misunderstanding regarding Iran, creating a lengthy war that you don't know what is your exit strategy in the end of it.
I think we understand from public statements made by the president that his plan B, let's call it that, is unconditional surrender by Iran. Is that even possible? And if so, what needs to happen for Iran to unconditionally surrender?
So it's return back to your previous question that the misunderstanding on Iran. They're not going to be unconditional surrender with this regime. If you want unconditional surrender, you'll have to change this regime. And we know hard it's going to be, and they don't have viable opposition. You have to continue the war, whatever. So it's another misunderstanding about the present administration regarding Iran. It's not going to happen regardless what they're going to throw against them. The most you can bring is some sort of understanding after the war with this regime or changing this regime. Now, I don't exclude the fact that the president can decide one day and say, actually, like Pete Hexter said, at the end of the day, we will decide whether they actually had the unconditional surrender, even if they're not going to say it, if they don't have the ability to fight against the US. So the meaning is unconditional surrender. So if you're going this path, So we might find ourselves one day waking up and Trump saying, "That's it. They don't have the ability to fight. This is unconditional surrender." So, but in the classical meaning of raising a white flag, this is not going to happen. Not with this regime.
So you said that in order to have something similar to an unconditional surrender, you have to replace this regime. And I think we all understand it almost became a token to say that in order for that to happen, you need the Iranian people to rise up against their own regime. And we have seen President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu calling on the Iranians to take it to the streets and replace this regime. I assume for people like the Iranians who are unused to or not used to getting bombarded, it is very scary to go outside and protest right now. What do you think needs to happen in order for them, let's say, use the terms of Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump to create the conditions for the Iranian people to go out to the streets and protest?
Well, it's very hard to speculate because it's very hard to know how revolutions starts. You don't know what will be the trigger that will push them on the streets. Now, definitely, if you're talking in an ideal world, you don't want to have the besieged insurgency in the streets. You want to see crackdowns in terms of defections, and you want to see people from the security services instead of pointing the rifles towards the demonstration to pointing that against the regime itself. This is the dream come true, and then people go to the street. But even if that will happen, there is no leader to this opposition. Probably we'll see a bloodshed, civil war before we'll see a Western Iranian thriving Iranian. That is not, I'm not going to. I don't think it will happen in the near future. But the problem that we have that even if you create these kind of conditions, eventually people will still be afraid. The Agency will still threaten them. The Agency, thousands of Agency men probably died. But the problem is that when you are looking, they have between 300 and 4,000 people. Adding to the Basij elements, you have more than a million people. So the regime is still resonate within the public. And even more than that, I think that while the bomb that you mentioned, while the bomb is actually being dropped on Tehran, it's very hard to see people go to the streets. And I'll say even more than that. When you are demolishing the infrastructure of the nation, even people that are against this regime will be very hesitant to fight against the regime because they want to reunify it against the external enemy. Something about running around the flag. So I think all in all, it will be very hard. Again, it's a Middle East, so we cannot say never or whatever, but it will be very hard during this war to see people going out to the streets. On the contrary, I think the war actually pushes people that hate this regime to rally around the flag, knowing that they want to first and foremost to protect the nation.
So I want to turn outwards for a second and talk about another threat Israel is facing. I personally live in northern Israel, so I also experience rockets from Hezbollah, in addition to those coming from Iran. And we saw that in June, Iran didn't really manage to harness Hezbollah's capabilities to its advantage, and now it's more so. Hezbollah is far more involved in the current rounds of fighting. What do you think changed, and how did Iran manage to harness Hezbollah's abilities in this round that it wasn't able to do so last time?
One of the major achievements of Hezbollah in this war, and I think that we mentioned that beforehand, is the fact that they were able to embed the proxies to the war itself. We'll speak about Hezbollah soon, but I think that we have to pay a closer look what's happening now in Iraq. The Shia militias are active in terms of attacking not only U.S. presence in northern part of Iraq, in Erbil, in the Kurdish province, but also again.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that was a surprise for most people. We thought that Iraq would not intervene, the militias in Iraq would not intervene.
Definitely, there are people who were surprised. I have to say that we in the NSS said that from the get-go that there is a good possibility of that because you have elements like Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq that if you're putting the regime in risk, they will intervene. So they're attacking Kuwait, Jordan, even Israel. So that's an element. The Houthi is another element. They're not intervening yet. It's a good question why, but then I think eventually, if war will continue, they will be involved. And Hezbollah is an important element. And I think that what we see actually, it's definitely the Iranian pressured them, but I think it was Hezbollah independent decision. We are a year and a half, more or less, after the ceasefire. And I think in Hezbollah view, Israel is hammering them, and nobody is actually defending Hezbollah. And in the past 14 months, they actually prepared for this war. Definitely, they used the decapitation of Khamenei to start the war. But of course, they used the pretext of of Lebanon, not connected to Iran. But of course, they used decapitation of Khamenei and decided to attack, and they were prepared for it. We have to say that they weren't caught by surprise, and I think that they knew that Israel is going to retaliate. They knew there's going to be a lot of pressure from the Lebanese government, but I think that for them, they didn't have other choice given the attacks that they suffered in the last 14 months in their view. So the problem that we have is they're managing the last 14 months actually rebuilding their capacity, especially from the short-range missiles, and also preserving the Radwan forces capabilities working in the southern, our Lebanese southern border, our northern border. And that is creating a major problem. The problem is that we're not going to dismantle them kinetically. But I think even more important, you have to ask yourself how we can put this genie back to the bottle. And I think that even if tomorrow Trump will stop the war against Iran, we'll still have the Lebanese problem because I don't think that Hezbollah will stop the war, regardless what is going to happen with Iran, because he wants to get assurances that eventually the ceasefire will turn back in its own conditions. So the problem that we are facing now is some sort of an open war that is connected to the Iranian war, but also connected to the Lebanese front. I think that for Israel, there is an opportunity also to think about the some sort of political agreement with the Lebanese government. I know that they are weak. The left is very weak. But you have the President Aoun and the Prime Minister Nawaz Salam. They want to change course regarding Lebanon. There's a lot of pressure from the Shia community as well. So I think instead of thinking only of kinetics, and I don't think kinetic is strong, I think that we have to think how we can embed it, political and diplomatic solutions, a creative one that actually will end the war. We have to assume another element. Hezbollah is not going anywhere. It's going to be part of the Lebanese, at least political system, for the years to come. So we have to see how we can find a way to mitigate his threat with diplomatic and kinetic means, knowing that at the end of the day, we cannot dismantle them like we didn't do the same thing with Hamas that is actually weaker than Hezbollah. So we have to be realistic. We have to understand that we have our limits. We have to use diplomacy. And in the end of the day, we have to think hard and clear what is the exit mechanism regarding Lebanon, regardless what will happen in Iran.
So I want to turn to another item on Iran's foreign relations agenda, and that's the Gulf states. And we have seen increasing attacks by Iran on Gulf states. And amazingly, we saw President Pezeshkian of Iran apologizing to Gulf states for hitting them. At the same time, the rockets are being sent from Iran to those same countries. And I think it can teach us two things. The first thing is about the internal politics of Iran and the power of the president there. And the second thing is that I want to focus on is what can we understand about the Iranian dual approach to the Gulf states? What is Iran trying to achieve? Does Iran really think that after this bombardment, the Gulf states are going to go back to diplomatic means with it?
Well, it's important question. I'll divide it to two answers in a way. One regarding Pezeshkian in his declaration, obvious that he has no ability to influence anything regarding the RGC and those who are running the show now in Iran. He's a very weak president, the weakest that was elected ever in the Islamic Republic. He's not running everything, and I think the declaration and the attack on Dubai airport immediately after actually highlighted that. And I think that the fact that he aligned with the RGC make us understand that he has no force or influence on the decision-making process in Iran today. He's a president, but not more than that. And I think that we have to turn to people like other elements within the Iranian leadership that I think much more influential, like Ali Larijani, the secretary of the SNS. This is one important element. And the other one, of course, is Ali Baf, as the speaker of the Majlis, and Vahidi, the commander of the RGC. Those are people that actually run the show in terms of Iran. So that's actually highlight the fact that there are frictions within the Iranian leadership. But I don't think it changed anything. They will continue like they're doing today to attack the Gulf states, and that leads us to the everything related to your second part of the question or first part. That what we're seeing now is a pre-planned way of thinking by the Iranians. It's not that it was a fluke. It's not like it was a surprise. They knew that the Gulf states, in their mind, are the weakest link of change of the change of the chain in terms of pressuring the U.S. to stop the war. They knew that they have in their mind they are low resilience and they can actually hammer them first and foremost the American bases over there because they want to create damage to the U.S. presence over there, but also punishing them for hosting the U.S. presence and also thinking how they can attacking their strategic facilities for them to pressure the U.S. government to stop the war. And this is something that will continue. And I think that next in line is everything related to their energy production lines, and meaning oil and gas. So I think in that regard, this is something that definitely we'll see continuing. Before this is, they thought about from the get-go. They want to hit Israel, but they know Israel is quite resilient, and they know that the weakest link in the chain will be the Gulf states. Now, in the day after the war, I don't think we need to be surprised that they have some sort of an outreach, or they will try to enhance their relations again with the Gulf states. I think the Gulf states will try to assess everything related to their presence, the U.S. presence on their soil, and everything related to the relationship with the Gulf, with Iran. But we have to remember one important thing: that Iran is not going anywhere, and this regime probably is not going anywhere. So the Gulf states will have to work with Iran regardless of what is happening today. Yes, they will not forget. Yes, there will be a lot of frictions. But I think if we think that we'll see some sort of an end to the relations between the Gulf states and Iran, I think that we are mistaken.
So I want to end by asking you a question. So we basically most of the time speak about what would be a success for Israel, what would be a success for the United States. I want to end by asking you, what is the desired end goal for Iran? What would the Iranian regime consider as a successful ending of this operation, war, whatever you want to call it?
I think that first and foremost is create the understanding within the Gulf states, US and Israel, the price they will pay if they will attack Iran again. That is the most important thing. Build a deterrence that will allow Iran to continue forward without thinking that the US and Israel are going to attack it in the future. This is why they are heading for war of attrition. This is why they believe that their resilience, the fact that it's a huge country, huge population, will help them in that regard. So I really think that they won't stop the war, and still they will have a notion that eventually they rebuild the deterrence equations in front of Israel and the US. That for them is crucial. Now, I'm not ruling out political outcomes. It can happen. But I think first and foremost, they will have to secure the fact that nobody will attack Iran in the future. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very hard. But definitely there is no trust between anyone, especially between the US and Iran. But I think that for them, this is crucial. And the fact that there is no ending mechanism that we can see in sight, on top of the fact that we talked about the misunderstanding of the US regarding Iran, lead us to understanding that this war will end in probably in one element, one option, is the fact that we'll have to see President Trump deciding one day to stop the war. So, returning back to what we discussed in the beginning of our discussion, that and still we have to think about the political solution, because this regime will rush to build the missiles, and probably will think about, as we discussed, to build a nuclear device. This is why it's not enough to stop the war like we had 12 days, like we had 8 months ago, 12-day war, and that's it. Because what happened that we stopped the war, they returned back to building capabilities. So we have to be realistic, but we have to aim on the nuclear, and we have to understand that even if the war will end with an unanimous or unilateral decision by President Trump, we have to seek something that will prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear bomb.
Danny, thank you very much. And I wish us all a safe and quiet rest of the day. And I assume we'll hear from you again in the next few days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
This was Brief.IL by INSS, a weekly dive into the events shaping Israel's national security. We warmly invite you to follow us on any podcast platform of your choice, and you can also watch us on YouTube on the INSS channel. And of course, stay safe wherever you are. Thank you to our team, Ariel Nugrian, Shai Shachaf, and Omer Vixelbaum.